Hey, what's up? And thank you for joining me for another episode of the Roots Podcast. Today, we'll be diving into the intricate structures of power, honor, and social hierarchy that defined the remarkable civilizations of both Spain and the Mexica. In this episode, I will specifically cover the various titles of nobility and social classes in Aztec society, and next week we'll cover the Spaniards. It's so often that we get caught up in these ideas that in pre colonial native society, there was egalitarianism. That may have been true in certain nomadic communities, perhaps in northern Mexico or in the American Southwest or other parts of the Americas. But in Mesoamerica, society was highly stratified. And I don't want to get too deep into this point, but being a stratified society was one sign of being an advanced society. Now, of course, this is not an endorsement of economic inequality, but if you look at the development of human civilizations throughout the world, and really I'm talking about human civilizations all throughout the world. If you look back to Mesopotamia, again, you see a highly stratified society. In Confucian societies such as China and Korea, social hierarchies still play an important role in human interactions on a daily basis. And Mesoamerica was no different in that respect. Just like in other advanced civilizations, different segments of society had different roles and different functions. And they did have, what we could think of as, noble lineages. And to that respect, there were noble bloodlines that were seen as part of the ruling class, and there were also bloodlines that were part of the working class or the commoner class. And of course, there was a priestly class that oftentimes overlapped with the ruling nobility. In many ways, these two were inseparable. And so, starting at the top was the Huey Tlatoani, or the Great Speaker. This was the highest position in Aztec society. He was similar to a king or an emperor. The Huey Tlatoani was also the supreme political and religious leader. Now, this position did not pass directly to the eldest son. It wasn't automatic, but the Huey Tlatoani was chosen from among the male members of the royal family by a council of nobles. And the members of this council of nobles, they were among the most influential people in Aztec society. Potential candidates were usually from the royal family, often brothers or nephews of the previous ruler, and had to demonstrate qualities such as leadership, military prowess, and wisdom to be considered suitable for this position. Then there was the Cihuacóatl, and you could think of him as the chief of staff to the Huey Tlatoani. This was a unique position, oftentimes held by a nobleman, and he effectively served as the second in command to the Huey Tlatoani, managing the day-to-day affairs of the empire. Next, there were the Tlatoanis, and not to be confused with the Huey Tlatoani. These Tlatoanis were the rulers of individual city-states within the Aztec Empire. They had considerable local power, but they were subordinate to the Huey Tlatoani of Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital. There were also the Tecutli, or noble lords. These were high-ranking nobles who often held important political and military roles within the empire. They were landowners and often had commoners working on their lands. There were also the Pipiltin, which was a general term for Aztec nobility, and it included the royal family and other high-ranking nobles. This class was hereditary, meaning that one was born into it. Members of the Pipiltin class often held important roles in the government, military, and priesthood. In many cases, a Tecutli would be part of the Pipiltin class, but not all Pipiltin were Tecutli. It's worth noting that in Aztec society, social structure was complex and fluid, and roles and titles could overlap or change based on an individual's accomplishments, particularly in the military. And then there was the well known and much feared Eagle and Jaguar warriors. These were elite military orders made up of the bravest warriors. Although they weren't necessarily nobles by birth, their prestigious status could elevate them to a noble like level within society. I'll cover them more in a separate video. There was another class of people, the Pochteca. This was the merchant class. Now, they weren't necessarily nobles, but they could become very influential based on their wealth. Now, this class of long distance traders had a unique role in Aztec society. They could amass significant wealth and had their own courts, but they were still considered to be commoners. However, their access to valuable goods and information made them influential. And then there were the Macehualtin, or the Macehuales, and probably much of society fell into this category. These were the common people who worked in various roles such as farmers, artisans, and minor merchants. Although they had limited social mobility, they could potentially move up in status through distinguished military service. The Macehualtin lived in organized communities called Calpulli, which were the fundamental units of the Aztec society. Each Calpulli was basically a large extended family or clan, and it functioned as a social, political, and economic unit. And each Calpulli had its own governing council and elected leaders who were responsible for administrative duties such as the distribution of land, organization of labor, and maintenance of public buildings. The members of the Calpulli worked cooperatively on the lands assigned to them, with the produce being distributed amongst the families. And then there were the Mayeques and the Tlacotin. In English, this would be the serfs and the slaves. You probably didn't want to end up in this category. These were the lowest classes in Aztec society. Mayeques were tied to the land they worked, while the Tlacotin were individuals who had been captured in war or sold themselves into slavery due to debt. Overall, it's important to note that while Aztec or Mexica society was highly stratified, there was some room for social mobility through, things like military service. Or you could also elevate your status by becoming a Pochteca or long distance merchant. So I think that's enough for today. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll talk to you all again next week.